brand and marketing are two different functions to some degree. They often come out of the same group within the firm, or like ownership of the brand often gets kind of subsumed by marketing. But your brand strategy is all about long-term, like who are we, what's our identity, and how do we clearly communicate that identity in the marketplace. Your marketing is, well, how do we then take that to individual groups who have different needs and different problems, right? Because they're engaging with us in a different industry on this vertical over here versus that one, or different service lines or service groups.
You're listening to the Remarkabrand podcast, where authentic brands win.
Hey, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the Remarkabrand podcast. I'm Mike Jones with my co-host here,
Sam Pagel.
Thanks, Sam, for doing this again, as usual. We're really excited for this episode. We're going to be talking all about how do you stay true to your brand as you're marketing, right? We've been spending a long time, a bunch of episodes talking about kind of different strategies, different areas of marketing, and how to get your brand out there. And today is going to be all about, okay, let's reel it back in. How do we make sure that we're staying on brand, even despite or in the midst of all this marketing activity? But before we do that, Sam, we got to do name 10 things. Did you have
That's
one?
right. That's right, Mike. I do.
Sweet.
And in the interest of kind of reeling it back into this topic we've been talking about for the last 6 months of inside out marketing, right?
Yep.
I want to name 10 other things that you can put inside out inside of your marketing. Okay.
T-shirt.
So yeah, t-shirts got to be number one on the list.
Inside out t-shirts.
Inside out t-shirts. I'm going to go, stick with apparel just as kind of a low hanging fruit here. I'm going to go with socks as the number 2 there.
Funny enough that you said fruit. I was thinking bananas. Inside out bananas.
Inside out bananas.
Everyone goes bananas for inside out bananas.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah.
That's probably going to be a new freeze dried snack at Costco soon, I'm sure. I'm going to go inside out bounce houses. You know?
Ooh, bounce houses inside out. I'm trying to figure this out in my head. Trying to picture it. I don't know. I don't know how that works.
I feel like, if you get a little air leak in one of them, you just turn it inside out and you're good to go.
Inside out refrigerators, which I would like one in my office right now, because then I wouldn't be hot. I would be cold.
That's great.
In this summer heat.
Yeah, that's really good.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, that's really good, Mike. I'm going to say inside out coffee mugs.
I love when the coffee just all over my face and my lap all at the same time. It's great.
Just, less defined space for your coffee, It's just it's probably just always feeling so constrained in there.
Everyone's favorite, inside out airplanes. Because you've always wanted to be on the outside of the airplane while it travels.
Yeah, that's really
30,000 feet in the air.
That does sound fun. It does sound a little bit more fun than being jammed into a sardine can.
Yeah, exciting. Hey, the great news is at that kind of wind speed, there's no way you're going to hear the baby crying 3 rows back.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. Probably don't get any snacks out there, though, I'm guessing.
They just throw them from the front.
Yeah. How about this one, Mike?
Catch them.
How about this one? Inside out internet. Inside out internet.
I'm so confused.
Yeah.
I don't even know.
I'm not even going to explain it.
Yeah, that's great. Inside out beach volleyball.
Sweet.
I don't know what that is. The net is on the outside, and you stand on the outside, and it's not a ball. It's just sand. I don't know, man.
So you're throwing sand around in a ball pit. Is that
ball pit? Yes, but from the outside of the net.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, it makes complete sense.
Total sense, right? Don't you get? You can picture it right now.
I'm tracking with you. Yeah, I'm gonna go with as kind of a wrap up here. Inside out instrumental music. It's kind of a concept I've been playing with,
I feel like you just took a word and applied inside out to it. It's great.
That's absolutely what I did. 100%.
I love it. That's the way to end it.
Find your frequency.
All right. Inside out marketing, though. Let's get back on a more serious topic here. So maybe it's helpful if we just kind of like talk about that concept for a minute and think about like, what is inside out marketing? We've spent like many episodes now kind of talking about it and different aspects of it. But when we originally had this idea, I think like about a year ago, we really were thinking about like there's this kind of philosophy or this idea of going to market that we felt like was missing out there. And that was this idea that like everyone starts by looking externally from their firm. They look at their competition, they look at the industry, they look at even like who their audience is and who they're trying to target, and creating, you know, audience segmentation and personas and, you know, ICPs, all that fun stuff, which is not bad. Those are all good things. We're not opposed to any of those things. We do all those with our clients, but it really started with like, are you starting with who you are first? And even thinking about like, okay, as we know who we are we applying that internally within our organization, within our firm first, before we go to market with it, right? Before we start making it like super public. And then even as we're going public with it, do we have this like, we are always true to ourselves. We are authentic to our own unique and different identity than anyone else, first and foremost. We're not leaning into like all the trends. We're not leaning into all the gaps in the marketplace. So, and then we applied that in a whole bunch of different ways. We looked at, you know, how do we do that with the creative? How do we do that with the media planning? How do we do that with, you know, being more interesting in our content? How do we do that in the types of like media that we produce? So, I don't know. What do you think about that, Sam? Is kind of an opportunity here to kind of look back. On our last, I don't know, what has it been, like 10 episodes?
Mike, I'm going to plagiarize. I'm going to permission to plagiarize, please.
Go for it.
I'm going to plagiarize our first book. You Are Remarkable.
That's good because we own the copyright. So
there's a section in that book.
Get sued.
Yeah. I hope we don't sue ourselves. Would that work, by the way? I don't know.
Inside out lawsuits.
Inside out lawsuits. Yes. I feel like people have tried that before and probably gone to prison. No, there's a section in that. There's a section. Ooh, that's a different topic.
Sorry, I'm totally ruining this.
There's a section in our first book that talks specifically about inside out marketing. And I think there's a good kind of word picture that we use to describe what this can look like, or maybe the opposite of what this looks like. And we talked about early adolescence, junior high, when you're starting to realize that there's an outside world and you're growing up a little bit, and you're starting to realize or notice that other people might be looking at you, and you all of a sudden realize that you're, you know, oh, I'm this person and there's all these other people around me, and I need to start acting like they want me to act so I can fit in. And, you know, we talked about how it takes years and maybe decades for people to kind of grow out of that and be comfortable with who they are again. And so we talk about modern marketing kind of being stuck in early adolescence, taking an outside in approach of like, what do other people want us to do? How do they want us to talk? What are other people doing that we should be doing? Like, we don't want to miss out on those things. And the result is, inevitably, when you do that in your marketing, your marketing becomes fake and inauthentic. You're trying so hard to create the perfect impression that you kind of come off as being fake and a fraud. Because when people do connect with that marketing and they are reeled in, and you get to talk to them, or you get to show them your product, or, hey, they buy into what you're doing, they spend money with you, and then all of a sudden they realize, like, wait a minute, this is not what you communicated to me 6 months ago when, you know, I saw your Facebook ad, or I hopped on with your sales team. So it's really about being real, being authentic, speaking from the inside out, and not relying on, like you said, Mike, trends. What is our competition doing? Oh, they did this big thing last month. It netted them like 3 new clients. We got to go do that. That's going to work for us. As opposed to like, wait, what's our brand? What do we believe in? Let's go back to the foundation. Let's be ourselves. Let's be confident in that.
Yep.
And that's where we get that inside out concept from.
Yep. I even wonder if there's an element of like, one of the thoughts we had kind of going into this episode was, what are the things you need to watch out for, right? That are going to cause you to stray from your own identity while you're going to market, right? As you're out there putting messaging out, you're trying to attract people in and build, relationships with potential clients, with existing clients. What's going to distract you from that? And I was thinking about this really based on a conversation that I saw on LinkedIn where a friend of ours posted a screenshot of a salesperson who had reached out to them and used some language that was like almost like creepy, like stalker type language. And I was sitting there and I'm like, well, I get why they use that language. They use that language because it's like disruptive and it elicits a response, right? Like it's definitely going to either creep you out or make you like want, at some level you want to respond, probably not positively, right? And I go, what makes you think that that's a good strategy other than like, well, if we get any response is better than no response, right? Well, I think it really comes down to like, well, why do people act like that in personal lives? Well, it's because they're desperate. There's something they want that they can't get. And so they're like going to this extreme. And I think there's, to some degree, the same thing happens with a lot of brands. We get desperate. And I do wonder if some of that is like we lose the patience for the vision, right? Yep. We've set this vision in place. We know it's going to take time, but maybe at some point in that process, we get like impatient. We go, oh, it's not working the way I thought it would. And there's a time and place to say, hey, is our vision in line or is our strategy in line? And we need to talk about that. Like, when do you go back and kind of rethink things? But I do wonder too, if it's just like you've gotten desperate and you've lost sight of like the end goal, right? Like, why is it we're doing this? What is the purpose for which we exist as an organization, as a firm? Are we doing that? Yeah, we're doing that. Maybe it's not happening quite at the speed that we were hoping, but like we know if we just continue to do the right things, we're going to get there. If you're confident in that, then I think it removes a lot of this like opportunity to get distracted, to start looking at your competition and going like, oh, we should just be exactly like them and do everything that they're doing and act like them, right? Because that's the real issue. It's not necessarily that their tactics are bad for you to do. The problem is that they're rooted in an identity that isn't yours. So you might come to the same tactical conclusions that they did, but it still needs to be rooted in your identity as an organization, in the way that you do things, the culture that you have, the vision that you have, and the values by which you do all those things. Yeah. So that was just a little bit of a tangent, but I thought it might be helpful for people to think about, like, are we becoming desperate? Right. Desperation breeds all sorts of bad decisions in life and in business.
You can think about, there might be some temptations to cut corners, to take shortcuts. I think about, the friend that you haven't talked to in 2 years who finally, like, he reaches out on LinkedIn or he texts you and says, hey, I'm in town. I'd love to grab coffee. Like, let's meet up, let's catch up. And you sit down at coffee with him and he's like, hey, so I've got this great new business opportunity I want to talk to you about. Right. And it's this multi-level marketing thing.
And the first thing he pulls out is a sheet of paper with a triangle on it.
He's like, this is not what you think. It's not a triangle,
it's not a pyramid scheme. It's a triangle.
Different than that. It's a triangle scheme. But it's that kind of mentality of like, you're going to cut corners. You're desperate, right? Like you've got to get business through the door. You're scrapping for whatever you can get. And that's when you turn to family and friends to see how much you can squeeze out of them. Or you're like, I don't know what I'm doing. So I'm just going to go look at the guy next door and copy all the stuff he does. I'm going to look at his website, every single page, and I'll tweak a few words here and there. It'll be fine. We just need to get something up. We just got to get something going. And you might have a tendency to also think like, we'll just do this for now. We're going to fix it later. And inevitably you don't, you get busy. It's really hard to work on your own marketing. And, over time, you just continue to go down that road. And then, that also, Mike, can kind of just stem from not really having a foundation in the first place. That's probably where a lot of firms, a lot of brands can really just kind of, I don't know, like build their house on sand, in the fact that they never really put effort and time into that. They started a business, they got some clients. They did a merger. That's great. They're growing. They're hiring people, but they've never really taken time to say, okay, like we do all these services and we work with these industries. Why are we doing this? And you mentioned that, Mike. Like what do we actually believe in? Like when a hard decision comes up, what are we basing that off of? Is it just the guy at the top, or is it like how we're feeling that day? How are you building that brand foundation so that these pitfalls, when you're trying to maintain, if you don't have a brand in the first place, it's not defined, how are you going to keep it consistent? And the further you branch out, we talked about marketing channels. The further you go in those marketing channels, the more you need those to do for you to bring in, leads and clients, the more that definition and that foundation is going to be important.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think too, like keeping your brand front and center. So like when you have defined it, making it clear, communicated it internally and externally, that's great. But you can even stray by just not continuing to put the brand in front of yourself and remind yourself, like, why is it we do what we do? How is it we make decisions, right? What are the values or the beliefs by which we do everything that we do, the decisions we make? What's the culture? What's the style? What's the personality of our firm? How do we do things our way and not everyone else's way? And it's okay. It's not necessarily well, they do it wrong and we do it right. It can just be like, this is a preference. We like to do it this way. This is who we are. And it becomes a definition of who you are and a bit of your style, right? And your personality. I was talking to a law firm recently and they mentioned like, hey, honestly, our personality is pretty traditional. And I looked at them and I go, that's awesome. Like you should lean into that. You should like figure out what else that means, maybe unpack that term a little bit and maybe put some more definition on it than just traditional. And they were like, oh, we're really straightforward. I was like, that's a great word. I like that. That's got some real good meaning to it. And there's a way to lean into this like traditional, straightforward law firm, right? We don't play. We don't have goofy. We're not goofy. We're not like super fun, right? They probably have fun at times, but, just we get the work done and it's done really well. It's done right. And we do it in a kind of traditional way. They might, they need to unpack that a little bit more, but I think there's a way that you can just say, hey, like other firms are not traditional. Maybe they're more modern in some of their approach, or they do things a little bit differently. We're not saying that's bad. We're just saying we do it this way. And that works really well for our clients and they love us for it. And so we do a great job. So I think that's another way of just, when you're thinking like, okay, how do we make sure we don't stray? The other one is beyond like establishing that definition is like, do we keep that definition in front of ourselves? Do we repeat it to ourselves? Do we look at it together? Do we assess ourselves by it? Do we ask others to give us input in how we're doing? Maybe ask some like key clients how you're doing. So what do you think about
Mike,
that, Sam?
Well, I'll take it back to the adolescent, comparison, right? So you're in junior high and you realize that you're not hanging out with the cool kids. So you start acting like the cool kids and you want to be a part of that group because they're always like doing all the fun, cool stuff. Everybody looks up to them. And you realize after, maybe you get into 8th grade and you realize like, I don't really like these guys all that much. Like, I'd rather just hang out with my actual friends and like actually be myself. Cause it's just, it takes a lot more energy to try to be somebody I'm not. That's kind of what we're talking about here. Like, you need to be okay with who you are as a brand. Like, like Mike said, maybe you're the boring accounting firm and everyone else is having this grand old time, but you're the boring accounting firm that's like getting all the work done, right? Or you're not pretending like, oh, we're so fun and like, oh, tax returns are fun and audits are fun. We make it all fun. Like, no, this is boring, but we love it because we're boring.
There's no drink carts rolling around on April 14th.
Exactly. But you need to be okay with that, because here's the magic of that. When you learn to communicate that and communicate that effectively, you're going to get the clients that want that and want to work with you because you're unique. You're not trying to be the fun accounting firm or the fun law firm or the fun engineering firm. Like, you are the engineering firm that cares about the minute details. And instead of going to happy hour, you're going to be back at the office looking at the plans just one more time, see if there's one more way that we can, streamline this. And so the way that you communicate that, and when you learn to communicate that effectively, truthfully, you're going to realize that, oh, we're actually working with the people and the clients that we want to work with now. And it's really good fits. And they like us, we like them. We're not trying to like be somebody we're not and fit into this weird box that they think that we should be and we think that they want us to be. But it's just, that's when it's like, okay, that's the magic of this inside out marketing, because now you're working with the right people. And when you communicate the right way, the people that want to find you, they're able to find you because you're talking about the things that they care about. And so it's kind of, it's that perfect marriage of like, we're truthful. It's, we're not exerting all this energy to kind of like bend the truth or like try to pretend something we're not, but we're also like finding the people that really value that stuff and love working with us because they're just like us, right?
Yep.
They're the restaurant chain that's like kind of boring at heart, but makes really good food, like they're not coming to your table with, white towels and the wine. Like, no, they're just putting a giant slab of meat on your table that's been, smoked for 36 hours and it's absolutely delicious. Right. So that's, those are some kind of hypothetical things, but it's that marriage of like, oh, we're actually talking about inside out marketing so that you can go get clients, but the right clients, the right people that want to work with you.
Yep. Yeah, I think that's really key. So, Sam, I think we got to talk about this elephant in the room, which is there is a time and place to like reassess your marketing strategy, right?
Totally.
So how do I know? Like, I don't want to stray from my brand, but I also know like if things aren't working, we got to change something, right? Like,
totally. Yeah.
So how do we do that? Like, what are some ways in which we can maybe think about, all right, how do we know when to kind of reevaluate the marketing strategy and when do we just kind of stick to our guns and continue to do what we've been doing?
Yeah. Well, I think that has to start kind of at the top, and hopefully, if you're in a marketing position in a professional services firm, you have access to the leadership of your firm. Maybe you're part of the leadership of your firm, but the leadership of the firm should be at least helping with that vision of like, what do you actually want? What do you guys want to be doing? All right, partners of the firm, what kind of work should we be bringing in as your marketing team? Without knowing that, you're just like, oh, we're just going to like audits for everyone, right? Like everybody, like we do this stuff. Like nobody cares about that. If you're trying to go out and get more audits, like, well, if somebody needs an audit, they've probably already been working with an auditing team. Why are you different? So you kind of have to know, like from the top down, again, kind of sort of that inside out idea of like, okay, what do you want? Like, what do we want to be doing? And then from there, it's like, okay, we want this service in these industries. That's what we're really good at. That's what we want to do. Okay. What kind of people are in positions to make decisions in those industries that need these services? And you start to break down those different people. So hopefully you have personas built out. If you haven't done that, it's a really good exercise. We talked about that. in these, one of these episodes over the last 6 months. If you don't know who you're talking to, it's really hard to know what they want and what they want to hear.
Yep.
And so if you've got some of that foundational stuff in place, then there could just be some like tinkering of different platforms. Like, hey, are we leveraging LinkedIn to the best of our abilities? Like, hey, we've really identified that our personas, like a lot of them are on LinkedIn. And when they're on LinkedIn, they're thinking about work. They're thinking about these things. So we should really hone in on that. Okay, what are some different, instead of just posting there once a day or once a week, what are some other ideas we can do to really make connections with those people? So I'm kind of getting into the weeds a little bit, but I think reassessing your marketing strategies, if you have a marketing team or if there's a leadership team with kind of a marketing bent to it, I would have these, your core values, have the core components of your brand integrated into those meetings, whether that's like a monthly meeting, a quarterly meeting. Go back to those and say, hey, remember this? Remember what we talked about like 3 months ago? It's still the same. Why are we doing what we do? Even if it's like a minute, just a minute in those meetings to kind of put you back into your place a little bit of like, hey, remember our brand? This is what we said we believe in. Here's our values. Here's why we do what we do. All right. Let's jump into some ideas here. But you frame it up, right? You're keeping it front and center instead of like, oh yeah, we did a rebrand 3 years ago and there's like this brand handbook somewhere. I don't even know where it is, but all right, let's get back into our marketing.
Yeah.
You should keep like tactically, you should.
We forgot about it, so let's rebrand.
Yeah. What I don't, our CEO left or like our old marketing person left. We don't know where that is. Yeah, let's just rebrand. Yep. Hopefully that's not the case. Hopefully like consistently, tactically, you have some way of at least bringing parts of your brand to the surface consistently over time, yep. Weekly, monthly, quarterly, to where those things are top of mind.
Yep. Yeah. And I think too, like, you've got to give yourself patience. You've got to have, some level of consistency in your marketing activity before you jettison the entire marketing plan, right? And I'm not talking about the brand. I think that's one thing we need to clarify. Hopefully we've done a good job of that in these past episodes, but brand and marketing are two different functions to some degree. They often come out of the same group within the firm, or like ownership of the brand often gets kind of subsumed by marketing. But your brand strategy is all about long-term, like who are we, what's our identity, and how do we clearly communicate that identity in the marketplace. Your marketing is, well, how do we then take that to individual groups who have different needs and different problems, right? Because they're engaging with us in a different industry on this vertical over here versus that one, or different service lines or service groups. And that's really what we're talking about. Like, so if you're thinking we need to blow up our entire brand, that's a different conversation. In fact, I would recommend checking out our book. We have our rebrand chapter in there, like when to rebrand. That's not what we're talking about. What we're talking about is like the daily activities of marketing, what we've been talking about for like about 10 episodes now. And how do you know what to do? What activities should you be doing? How do you message within those things? How do you create content for them? What's the primary message that you're putting out there? How do you even know like what channels to be on? Those kinds of things. That strategy also requires patience. Not as much patience as your brand strategy does, right? To see played out. It can take years for your brand strategy. I would hope you're building a brand strategy to last for, years, if not decades, right? But your marketing strategy needs time to develop. So like, here's a great case in point. If you're standing up a podcast and let's say you've committed and you have the resources and you are doing it, you are podcasting let's say you're doing it every single week, which I think for most firms blows their mind that they even consider that, right? Like, and I'll be the first to admit, like weekly sounds insane to me. I don't know if I could do it, at least not right yet. But like, let's say you're doing it. Let's say you're doing it weekly. How long do you do that before you say, you know what? The numbers aren't there. We're throwing in the towel, right? I think you have to give that at least a year. And I think that's going to be really hard for a lot of firms to palate that that length of time to commit to an activity. I think most activities, at least at like an activity level of like a type of content being produced on a regular basis, I think you need about a year. I think you need at the very least 6 months to really say like, we've committed, we've done it over and over and over again for at least 6 months, but maybe 12. Let's get it to 12, right? And we can now assess whether or not this is really that effective. Now, does that mean that you don't change anything in your tactical plan in those 12 months? No, you should be testing different messaging. You should be trying, hey, let's add in another channel. Let's see if we can get a little bit more traction here. But when you've determined that there is like a particular strategy that really falls into place and it meets the needs of what we think our target audience is, it meets the needs that we think they have, and ideally you've done your homework, as we already outlined in past episodes, like you've really, really done your homework to know and have a lot of confidence that we have the right messaging, right? But if you need to, tweak the messaging a little bit, tweak the channels. I'd be a little afraid of changing your media types too quickly, because it's that can get really expensive really fast to be constantly trying different kinds of media.
Yeah.
But like stick with a strategy for about a year before you completely blow it up, right? Maybe you got to tweak some things in there. But if you're like, you know what, we need to try a whole different industry, and you're only 3 months in, like, I'd be like, you haven't given it long enough. That is not enough runway for anyone to have a valid argument that you've spent enough time building the credibility that's required in that industry to say, no, this isn't going to work, right? You've got to have the patience in there. It probably won't be cut and dry 1 year for every single firm in every situation, but that would be kind of my benchmark that I would be looking at. Maybe look at your marketing strategy about once a year, right? And for those of you that are more mature in terms of your business, in terms of your marketing strategy, you're like, oh, we've been doing a lot of this. It's working. We've got a pretty good pattern. Maybe you don't have to like totally reassess it every year. Maybe it's every 18 months. Maybe it's every 3 years, something like that. When I think about like aligning this with the actual like vision and goals of the business, most businesses operate or tend to operate best on about a 3-year plan, right? So when they think about like, what are our goals? You can usually see about 3 years out and have some kind of confidence, like, I think we can probably hit that number, and we can probably reach those particular objectives that we have in order to get to that number. If you start pushing your vision beyond 3 years, you're starting to get into like kind of pie in the sky, like maybe we can, maybe we can't, don't exactly know what it's going to look like. I'm not saying don't do that kind of vision casting, but 3 years is probably about the number that you're going to feel like comfortable with. If you're in leadership within a firm, that's probably where you're going to be like, yeah, I can kind of see 3 years out, right? Especially for more mature businesses that are bigger and have been around for a while. And I think your marketing should probably fall in line with that. Like, marketing strategy, maybe reassessing or doing some major tweaks every year, but really you should probably be looking at a 3-year plan that falls in line with your overall business plan that's hopefully being developed for your firm. I know not every firm does.
We talked a lot about measuring, Mike, and to your point, I mean, you can't get an accurate measurement with 3 months of data.
No.
Especially because, I mean, in a lot of professional services firms, we're the same way. A lot of these, the growth of the firm needs to come from building actual relationships, right? Like, you're probably not getting 10 conversions every month from the latest campaign that you're running through, a landing page, and you've got, oh, wow, we had, 10 restaurant owners fill out this form this month and they want to start a long-term relationship. That doesn't happen. Most likely it's, oh yeah, we're at a conference. Oh yeah, I've seen you guys before. Oh yeah. Oh, you know what? We're looking to change our CPA firm. Oh yeah, we should talk. That sort of thing where it's like, they've heard of you, they've seen the logo, maybe they've resonated with one of your blog posts that you posted on LinkedIn or whatever that looks like. But how do you measure that over time? Because a lot of the best marketing doesn't just come from like, oh, random idea, throw it out there. Oh my goodness, it worked. Overnight success. A lot of times it's like, no, you're crafting it down. You're testing and you're retesting and you're refining. Okay, this part worked. People don't care about this. Let's talk more about this. All right, yeah, people are really resonating with that message. Now let's tailor it to a very specific niche. And it's like, oh wow, okay. So over time, through your measurement, you're able to craft those things down. And when that's done under the protection and built on the foundation of a strong brand, then that's where really, really good marketing happens.
Yep. Yeah, you got to give it enough time. And some of that even might be determined in your sales cycle, right? Like how long does it take to go from a prospect who is marketing qualified through to an actual closed contract? If that's like on average 3 months or 6 months for your firm, then you've got to give it enough runway to even have that many marketing qualified leads in the pipeline before you even get to sales qualified, before you even get to like a closed deal. So again, I think that sweet spot is probably about, annual or maybe every 2 years, something like that. You're giving it enough runway that you can really, really get there, right? And have some really, really secure numbers. Again, like you were saying, Sam, you're going to make tweaks. You're going to make little changes on the margins, but you're not making holistic, complete strategic changes, strategic shifts,
right,
in that time frame. So I think
there's ways to speed that up too, Mike. I think it's not always the case of like, all right, we're running thin on work, but oh wow, we gotta wait nine months to get a new client. No, I think there's ways to speed that up, especially when you can kind of, like I said, kind of top down, like, all right, who do we really want to be working with? Let's go out and identify, 10, 20, 30 of our top potential clients. And let's put a plan together, not to just like berate them or like call them every day, but like, how do we genuinely connect with those people that we really want to work with, that we really think we would add a lot of value or we'd be able to serve them really well.
Yep.
Again, like being authentic in your marketing, not just like cold calling, random people and saying, need a new firm. We've got everything, best price, lowest price, best value. Like what really connects with them? What are their pain points? Like, how can you serve them in the best way? And sometimes that doesn't mean they're paying you. Sometimes like you're serving them, and it really can't be like, I'm going to serve you, so you better work with us. Like, I'm going to do some cool things for you, so you better. It's like, you need help with QuickBooks Online? Hey, we've got a partner of our firm. He's a wizard. I'd love to connect you with him. Like, hey, he'd probably just love to sit down with you for an hour and just like show you the ropes a little bit.
Yep.
Versus like, oh yeah, we can help you with that. Let's get a contract signed and we'd love to help you with that. Like that stuff is working less and less nowadays. It's like, how can we get in? How can we show our value? How can we serve you well before there's ever this exchange of money or like, hey, sign this contract. Yep. That sort of thing is how you build long-term relationships. That's how they remember you.
Yeah. It's funny. It's like at one level it's relationship building, but it also is just like marketing 101. Like it's why the samples at Costco work, right? Like I got to taste the product before I bought it, right? It's why like Baskin Robbins would do the little like, taste. They pretty much give you a taste of any flavor they had in that in that freezer case, because they knew like once you're in the door, like you just want to try the product. You want to give it you want to do a test drive of the vehicle before you buy it. And services are no different, right? Everyone wants the assurance that I'm going to be working with someone who really understands what the problems that I have. They understand me. Yeah. And one of the ways you do that is you say, all right, let's open the hood. Let's figure this out. Let me give you a little bit of my expertise. at no cost to you.
Right.
There's a lot of different ways to do that. You can do that at scale. That's another big challenge I think a lot of firms have, is they think like, oh, that means I got to give away a bunch of consulting hours. No, you can do it in group sessions. You can do it in webinars. You can do it
in a half an hour.
You can do it in an online course. You know, you can do it in videos, pre-recorded videos. Now, obviously, at some point, especially for like high-end professional services that are B2B, probably are going to have to get on a call, right? And you're going to have to give away a little bit. But consultative selling, consultative marketing, however you want to slice that, call it, that definitely needs to be a part of it. That I feel like is like a whole nother episode we need to have. So what roles should we be thinking about in our firms that can help us make sure that we stay on point with our brand, right? As we're going and we're executing marketing, what are the roles that are going to be really critical in that process? I can think of like, obviously your marketing leader. That's kind of an obvious one, who hopefully you're the one listening to this. But if you're in that CMO seat or some kind of equivalent to that in your firm, I think another big one, I'll be really honest, we've worked with a lot of firms over the years. The branding type work that we do, whether that's a full-on rebrand or some consulting around the brand strategy of the firm, the best ones that really stick and see value in terms of like their effectiveness of it over a long period of time are because the primary leader at the top, the CEO or the managing partner or president, whatever title they own, but whoever is at kind of at the top of the totem pole in terms of decision making within the firm, they own that brand strategy. They they believe in it, and they say, yes, this is us, hook, line, sinker. We believe in this, and we're going to push this forward ourselves along with everyone else in the firm. And when that person is not bought in, when they don't believe in the brand, or they just struggle to communicate it, probably because they don't think it's important. They just don't think it's important. Maybe it's not, I'm going to delegate that down to someone else. It's less effective, and they tend to stray. Those firms tend to stray from their brand, and I think ultimately get themselves in a lot of trouble because it produces so much confusion, both inside the firm and outside the firm. So I think those two roles are probably the most critical. But who else should we be thinking about, Sam, that is really important in this process?
So I think there's two groups. I think one is just your general kind of team, your employee base, talking to them regularly. Hopefully there's some kind of, maybe it's not the whole entire firm, but maybe there's groups where, again, like you're bringing the brand to the forefront. You're talking about certain elements consistently, so that it's not just this like thing that people have heard of but have never actually seen the definition of, or hey, the marketing, CMO, they're always talking about that. Nobody knows what it is. We don't even know what the brand is, but they're all about it. Oh, that's just a marketing tool, whatever. Hopefully that's like front and center with your employees. But if it is, and maybe even if it isn't, you should like maybe once a year at least be asking, kind of polling internally, like, hey, here's our values. Are we living up to these as a firm? And then the other group of people, which I think is really, really valuable, is your customers, right? They're stakeholders in your business. They're stakeholders in your brand. So many times we do this a lot. We run both interviews, like longer interviews, and then just kind of like really broad polls or surveys. And sometimes the leadership of a firm can be a little surprised and like, we thought we were this. Our customers did not think that. They said it was completely the opposite. And so kind of having that framework, right? And it's not that your customers get to dictate who you are. They don't get to say like, no, this is your brand. But your customers are the ones using your services. They're interacting with your teams. They know a lot about you, especially if they've been working with you for a long time. And if you've got employees who have worked with you for a long time, those two groups of people are really, really critical. And you should be tapping into their minds, their brains. Like a lot of times it might feel like, I don't want to bother them. Like they're busy, like our clients are busy, but like a lot of times they're not going to turn you down.
Yep.
And sometimes you can frame that as just like hey, let's jump on a call. Like I've just got a couple questions. I'd love to see how you're doing first and foremost, but then I'd love to just like see, and you could even frame that as like how are we doing? How are we doing as a company? Are we serving you well? Like, hey, this is what these are our values. Like, do you see these come out in interactions? And a lot of times they'll be honest with you. So those two groups of people I think are really valuable in kind of measuring, making sure you're not straying too far. Well, you shouldn't be straying at all, but straying from your brand foundation.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think another set of roles to be thinking about is the creatives, right? Whether those are internal or external to your firm that are supporting your marketing. Do they really understand the brand? Do they believe in it? Are they able to kind of hold it and maintain some consistency while still being creative, right? We don't want to squash the creativity in that process. We spent a whole episode talking about how you can be interesting while staying on brand. But I think your creatives are very critical in this process. Do you have a writer who really understands how to write as your voice as a firm? Do you have a designer or a set of designers who really know how to design in a way that reflects not only the visual like guidelines of your firm, like, oh, okay, that's fine. That's one thing, but actually like really get and own the values and the personality of the firm. Right. And that's where there's a ton of opportunity to be creative. Right. So you can still be true to the colors and the fonts and all the visual guidelines of your brand, and yet open kind of the box of ideas when you can say, all right, beyond this, as long as it holds to our values and our personality, let's try it. Let's give it a shot. Let's look at it, put a concept together. We can talk about it and say, yeah, we could do that. That might stretch kind of the boundaries of where we've been in the past visually, but it still feels like us because it's reflecting our values and our personality as a firm.
Yeah.
But that can only happen if you've got creatives who are like hook, line, sinker, bought in, right? And I think this kind of goes back to like probably a very old adage that I got from an early mentor in my marketing career. And honestly, it's not anything new that he came up with. I think this is just really good marketers understand that if you don't believe in the product and the service and the brand that it stands, that stands behind those things, you're not going to be an effective marketer. And so like your team, if you're putting a team together or you're hiring an agency or you're hiring contractors to help support you in your marketing, at some level, they need to believe in what you do. If you're hiring people and they do not care about accounting and you're an accounting firm, that's going to be tough for them to really like be creative and market you well. And all the much more so if it's like, well, maybe they come from an accounting background or they have some experience in the industry, but they're not really bought into you and your firm and the culture that you have, the personality that you have, the values that you have. It's going to be reflected. You're going to see it in the final output. And so that would just be another role or set of roles that you should be thinking about.
That's a really good point, Mike, because as a creative, I can be more creative. I can produce better quality media, whatever it is, when I have more constraints. Mm-hmm. When somebody says, hey, we need a one-pager for our firm. Okay, well, tell me about it. Oh, just go do it. Just go do the one-pager. Do you have any content? No, just do it. As opposed to, hey, we need a one-page document for our firm. Here's bullet point lists of things we want to touch on. Here's our colors. Here's our fonts. Here's our style. Hey, when you pick an image, it needs to be like this. Then I'm like, oh, let's go. I'm ready. Like, and I can make this thing like like, ooh. Yeah. That's when creatives really get excited. When you give them some vague, like, hey, we need a one pager because our sales team, they said they needed that. And it's like, well, what does that even mean? Yeah. As opposed to like, hey, here's the confined like space you get to work in. And creatives love that because then they can go out. They don't have to make all of those decisions. They get to go do what they do best. And you shouldn't really be needing to do that every single time you need something. Mm-hmm. You should have those rules and those guidelines in place for your brand so that when it does come time to be like, hey, sales team needs a deck, they really want it to look nice, and your creative team already says, oh, we already know, like, here's the colors, here's the usages of that, here's our fonts. When we're picking images, we know exactly what needs to be in those and what they need to look like. That makes it so much easier. And a really good point, Mike, because so much of what the outside world is going to see of your brand comes from those creatives who are working on your website, your sales documents, your decks, your social media imagery, all that stuff. Yep. So it's a really good point.
Yep. Yeah, and there's, I think, a sub point in there around the consistency that's required, right? So like using the same people. So if you're hiring contractors or you're hiring an agency, there is value in like keeping that consistent as much as you can. Obviously, if you got a lot of turnover in your marketing team or amongst the creatives on your team, you're just going to have a hard time staying on brand. You're going to basically have to be retraining people all the time, and them trying to learn and understand like what is on brand, what's not off brand. I think that lends me to one other idea too, is what are the unwritten rules of your brand, right? So you might have these kind of high level guidelines. Here's our values, personality, our, voice tone and mood for our language and how we speak. We have, visual guidelines for our logo, colors, fonts, photography guidelines, maybe some patterns and textures that we pull in on a regular basis. But beyond that, right, maybe there's some additional rules and things that you follow in either your content creation, in the way that you write, in the way that you design, in the visual aspects of your brand. Look for those, and those can be like really, really minor, but starting to like flesh out, like, are there additional rules that we kind of see over and over again that like, oh, these patterns of we always design things this way, or we always write things this way, that are beyond just kind of the high level standard guidelines. Start to document those, and you might find yourselves having a little bit more opportunity to like really, really dial in exactly who you are and how you bring yourself to market, or at least for a time, right? Like maybe it's like, hey, we got a lot of visual styles for the next like year or 2 years that are beyond colors, fonts, logo, tagline, all that stuff. And just being consistent with those. Like, we're going to use these over and over and over again. We'll probably be a little bit tired of them after the next year, right? But that's okay. We should be tired of our own brand at some level. That means we're doing it consistently.
Yeah.
As I like remind everybody, I think every episode. But yeah. Man, we've covered so much already. Sam, is there any like final thoughts on this inside out marketing that we need to leave everybody?
Well, Mike, inside out marketing is not a magic bullet or a special button that you can push that makes everything work perfectly. Inside out marketing is really just a process. It's an ongoing process. It requires vigilance. It requires regular kind of self-assessment of the brand. And sometimes a willingness to adjust the course when needed, but hopefully not adjusting the brand when something isn't working in your marketing. And just always remembering that your brand should be kind of the heart and soul of your organization. Every decision, whether it's marketing or a different division of the firm, should flow through that core. And you should be asking yourself, hey, is what we're doing still us? Does it still feel like our firm and our brand? Because you need to remember that the end goal is to connect with other human beings, right? It's not just to get more hits on the website. It's actually to create genuine, authentic human relationships, not so you can squeeze people out of their money, but so that you can serve them well and build lasting relationships.
Yep. That's great, Sam. I don't know if I could say it any better than what you said. I would just add to, like, keep reminding yourselves of what makes you remarkable, right? As a firm, like just keep putting those things. If you've done the hard work of defining who you are, these are our values, this is our personality, this is our anthem, this is why we exist, this is what we do day in and day out, the goals that we're trying to achieve for our clients. If you're in professional services, like at the end of the day, you're there to serve your clients. So, if you've done that hard work figuring out how do we do that? How do we do that as us? Keep putting those things in front of yourselves. Don't ever let those go, and let those slide to the wayside. I think that would be my kind of final take on this episode is, when you put them aside, that's when you go sideways with your brand, and your marketing is going to suffer. Your people are going to suffer. You're going to find like even your culture has a hit to it. And it's not fun. It's just not fun anymore. So don't do that. It's good to be reminded of that for myself too. Like we got to keep doing that. Keep putting our own brand definition in front of ourselves and reminding ourselves, this is what we do. This is why we do it. Here's the people we're trying to help, and just keep staying the course. So just appreciate everybody for listening in on this episode and really this whole series. I don't think we've even really made it super clear that we've been doing a series, but because we didn't know how long it was going to be. We just were like, let's go. And we're 10, 12 episodes in, and we've just absolutely loved it. We're going to be changing things up a little bit on the podcast coming up. So if you've been listening in for a while and you're used to Sam and I talking all the time, we will definitely be talking. We'll be having episodes with Sam and I on it. But I'm also going to be looking at bringing on some others from outside of our organization, some of our clients, some other people in the accounting industry and even other industries to talk about what they're doing with their marketing and with their brands. And I'm just really excited for kind of a new season for us in the podcast. And then we got lots of other stuff we're working on that we're not ready to talk about yet in the podcast world. But Sam and I are very excited about many things that we're working on that'll be coming up in the coming months. So definitely stay tuned, and definitely don't forget that you all are very remarkable.
The Remarkable Brand Podcast is a project of Resound and is recorded in Gilbert, Arizona. You can find us on Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn, and at remarkablecast.com. If you'd like more episodes, subscribe on iTunes, Stitcher, Google Play, or wherever you prefer to get your podcasts. To contact the show, find out more about the Remarkable Brand Podcast, or to join our newsletter list to make sure you never miss another episode, check out our website at remarkablecast.com. Copyright Resound Creative Media, LLC.